Hello everyone, so thank you for joining me today. I'm a professional house historian and I've been fortunate enough to carry out research on a couple of almshouses. You may well have come across some old almshouses in villages or towns you've visited, and the quintessential almshouse is one within a small row of attractive terrace cottages, many originally dating back to the 17th or 18th century, and identified by plaques noting when they were first established and by whom. Quite often they include other features such as coats of arms, clock towers and sundials. However, these represent only a proportion of almshouses, and there are many more modern examples. For this talk, I'm going to run through a brief history of almshouses. At the end, I'll also briefly mention how you can find almshouses and also those people who once lived in them. Almshouses date from the medieval period when they were established by religious orders to provide a home for poor or old people and also to provide shelter to travellers. Known originally as bead houses, bead being the Anglo-Saxon word for prayer, or hospitals after the Latin word hospes, which means both host and guest. The word reflects the Christian duty to shelter any stranger, particularly passing pilgrims, which signified a stranger or foreigner. The first recorded almshouse was founded in York in 936 AD by King Athelstan, and the oldest still in existence is thought to be the Hospital of St Oswald in Worcester, which was founded in around 990 AD. It is believed that the Bishop of Worcester, St Oswald, created the hospital where, in addition to ministering the sick, the brothers could help the poor and give shelter to those travellers arriving after the city gates had closed at night. The first documentary reference to the hospital, though, was only in 1268. Whilst the founder obviously had good intentions, on a couple of occasions in the 14th century, it was recorded that the monks of St Oswald fell into disrepute due to their dissolute lives, and the master was disposed as a result. The current almshouses were built in 1873 and provide accommodation for 23 residents. Other almshouses were founded by medieval trade guilds to provide care for their elderly members who could no longer manage life in their own homes, and this tradition is continued by many of the City of London livery companies, including the Mercers Company. One famous mercer was Dick Whittington, the Lord Mayor of London in the early 15th century, who is now better known from the pantomime that bears his name. His will provided for the establishment of local almshouses in Highgate in London. Richard Whittington's charity recently replaced these by building new accommodation in East Grinstead, which provides 56 homes for elderly ladies and a few married couples. Many former leper houses also became almshouses in the later Middle Ages. The disease had been rife in the early Middle Ages, but had begun to recede by the later 14th century. While rules in medieval almshouses were normally strict, places were in demand as the almshouse offered an escape from poverty and provided food and shelter. Other almshouses were founded by prosperous landowners, nobles and merchants, often leaving money or land in their wills to provide for almshouses to be established. No doubt some of these bequests were seen as a means to ease their passage to heaven through good works. When King Henry VIII came to the throne in 1509, almshouses were a common feature in towns, and there were around 800 hospitals around the country, which functioned as almshouses. Officially, many of these were regarded as chantries, as they incorporated a chapel, and most of these were dissolved in the 1540s following the Reformation, when King Henry broke away from the Catholic Church. In 1545, Parliament passed an act which defined chantries as representing misapplied funds and misappropriated lands, and chantries were abolished. Many such almshouses were either sold to landowners or left to ruin. A few almshouses from the medieval period have survived, although these have mostly been heavily renovated, a good example being the Guild of the Holy Cross almshouses in Stratford-on-Avon, which were built in 1427–8, but were much altered the following century and restored in the Victorian period and again in the 1980s. New almshouses were subsequently founded by the Elizabethan and Stuart gentry and professional classes, and many of the old traditional style of almshouses date from this period, with terrace cottages typically built in groups of 6 to 12 dwellings and often marked with a plaque naming the benefactor. As you can see on this slide, there are sort of typical examples from this period. Other almshouses date from the Victorian period. With the expanding population and the migration of people from rural areas to the towns, housing became a huge social problem. Atrocious conditions in the new workhouses inspired wealthy philanthropists to found almshouses, mostly to assist the elderly in their local area, many of whom would have otherwise been forced to enter the local workhouse. It is estimated that some 30% of current almshouses were founded during this period. During the course of the 20th century, most of the historic almshouses were given charitable status and were restored and extended as necessary to provide homes for local elderly residents. Many modern almshouses were also built to provide additional accommodation for locals, including some very recent ones, such as Manning Place in Richmond in London, which were acquired in 2017 by the Richmond Charities, which run 140 almshouses in the town. There are currently around 2,600 almshouses in the UK, providing accommodation for around 36,000 elderly people in financial need. The majority are administered by volunteer trustees and aim to support the continued independence of their residents. In most cases, the occupants were previously living in the geographic area and pay an affordable weekly maintenance contribution. Financial support comes from bequests, donations and fundraising efforts. If you want to find out more about almshouses themselves, most of the older ones have listed building status, and these can be searched on Historic England's site on the link shown. There are also lists of English almshouses on Wikipedia too, but this is not a comprehensive list. The almshouses.org site also has a lot of information. There are also a few historic almshouses that are open to visitors at certain times, such as Eastbridge Hospital in Canterbury and Liddington Bede House in Rutland. Some of our ancestors may have been almsmen and women, either those who gave alms or lived in almshouses. You can search on the index census returns on genealogy sites such as Ancestry and Find My Past using their keyword search facility and the terms almsmen, etc. to find results, although they do vary from site to site. Many old records regarding almshouses can also be found in collections at local archives, including details of the charity, minutes of the trustees, accounts and general correspondence, and also old photographs. The example on this slide shows the plan for an almshouse built in 1657. So I hope you found this talk interesting. If you have any queries, you can contact me via the details on this slide. Thank you.